Hello everyone and welcome to Composition 1. This is the writing class, the only writing class I'm teaching this semester, and last week we did not have a video lecture, mostly because I was having trouble recording, trying to sort out whether I should use my laptop or I have a nice microphone or what I should do. I ended up starting to record with my phone, so this is the best we can get in terms of quality right now. If we do this over the long term, there is a rumor going around that the English department will be supplying each professor with their own webcam. So hopefully the quality will only improve as the semester goes on. I want to briefly go over just the syllabus itself and explain in general terms what I expect this semester. So the main purpose of this class is to improve your writing, which in a 3-month period, in 15 weeks, 3.5 months, that's quite difficult. You may or may not see a big improvement this semester, but the main goal is to prepare your writing to the point where you're able to start writing essays. This is not an essay class. That's something my students are afraid of, I think. It's partly because Korean students regularly or normally don't do much writing in high school, at least in terms of writing essays, so it's a little bit intimidating. But since most of you are freshmen, this is Composition 1, it's important, I think, to get the basics down and to form sort of a backbone which you can use to develop your writing skills for all of your classes later. It doesn't matter if you're an English major or not. We're going to focus on paragraph writing specifically because those are the main building blocks of an essay, or the building blocks of any type of writing in English is to write good quality paragraphs. So that's why the title of the book is Writing Paragraphs. I've been using this for a really long time. After my first couple of years here, I settled on this book, and I think it's hard for me to choose something else, for at least for this class, because there's a lot of skill-based exercises in this book, which are very useful for, as I said, getting the basics of writing down. Writing is a less natural thing than speaking for most people. Some people do like writing, but I usually start this class out by introducing myself. Hello, good afternoon, I'm Professor Sullivan, and why are you taking this class? Are you interested in writing? Do you like writing? And very few hands go up. Usually there's sometimes there's nobody. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 students that put their hands up and say, oh yeah, I really enjoy writing. And that's great if you enjoy writing, but an essay class will dampen your enthusiasm for writing usually. That's what happened to me. I loved writing as a child all the way through until I became an English major, and then every semester I had to write at least a dozen, by which I mean 12. I had to write many essays every semester, and then I did my master's degree and I had to do a thesis, and by the time I was done those 5.5 years of school, I never wanted to write. I didn't want to write anything for a while. And then I ended up writing a book 10 years later. So your love of writing, I'm not going to try and discourage you from writing, because creative writing is very, very fun and enjoyable and rewarding. And I encourage all of you to do as much writing as possible, because that's the most important thing. To have a positive attitude about your writing and to write as much as possible. One of my professors said, if you're serious about being a professor, you need to write every day. Which I broke that rule pretty quickly, even after I became a professor, but it's good advice. The more you write, the better you will be. We always wonder, how could people like Charles Dickens and Shakespeare and Jane Austen write such amazing pieces of literature for us. And they are geniuses. I'm not going to dispute that, but the process for all of them sometimes is very painful, and they had tons of experience and they worked hard. They put in the hours and they put in the time to create some beautiful writing for us to enjoy. So this is where it starts, getting the basics down. I asked you to read the introduction over because they explain a few things about the differences between different formats and how you should submit your paper, and how you should identify yourself in the class, and where you should put things, and how you should orient things so that people can read your writing better. So I hope you read that over, but we'll come back to that when I ask you to do an assignment and I ask you to write a paragraph. I will give you specific instructions about how to put it together so everybody's format is the same, so I can look at your paper and I can evaluate it fairly, and so that I don't have trouble trying to understand how things look. If everything looks different and the styles are all dramatically different and the format is different, then it'll be difficult for me to fairly evaluate you and give you the grade that you deserve. So we are fortunate that this is a writing class, and the participation grade is only 10%, which is based on your attendance, and everything else in the class is about what you submit. I have to emphasize, and believe me, despite the fact that I say this, there's always students that don't follow the rules. You cannot plagiarize, you cannot cheat and take information or writing from other sources without recognizing where they came from. If you use a quote, if you write something that's directly taken, or you basically, paraphrasing is kind of okay, but if you take information from anywhere, what you need to do is at the end of the paper, at the end of the paragraph, you need to write references, and then you need to put the website, the book, the article, the newspaper, or even in the case that it's a person speaking, write down wherever you got it from so that I can check where that information came from. It's very obvious, and I remember my own professors threatening us and saying, I'll catch you, and I can tell when you're not writing your own stuff. And I was skeptical, but when you've seen hundreds of samples of writing, then you can recognize what a first-year student should be able to write like, whether they're a native speaker or they're from Korea or China or anywhere else in the world, from Europe or Asia. It doesn't matter. If you're inconsistent, you're obviously bringing something from outside your experience in it, and you're not using your own writing style. If it's going along in a certain writing style and suddenly it sounds like Shakespeare, and then it goes back to the normal writing style again, it's just very obvious for somebody like me who's spent hundreds of hours until I'm losing my eyesight staring at papers. So please don't do that. Don't plagiarize, don't copy other people's work. It's pretty apparent when somebody who has lots of experience to diagnose something like cheating. So don't do that. If you get caught, you get a 0. If you do it twice, the policy of the university is you fail. If it's really serious, then you'll be referred to the academic dishonesty, the committee on academic reviews in the administration, and they will decide whether you should be punished beyond that, which could amount to you losing a semester or being expelled. So take it seriously. It's just like anything else. Don't steal or borrow or take or cheat, because most students are doing the work honestly and spending the time, and they deserve to get the good grades, and if you do that, you don't. Okay, so that's my speech about the course in general. Now I want to talk about what's happening in week 2. I will give you your first homework assignment. It's due next Thursday. Today is the 26th, so next week, let me check. It's April 2nd is next Thursday. So the things that I ask you to do, there'll be a write-up on the website for you to refer to as well. But make sure you log on through the CNU portal and you get credit for watching this video and for reading the summary that I post tomorrow. Today is Wednesday, and tomorrow is what would normally be our class on Thursday, but obviously we're not doing that. So make sure you read over the summary and you check this video lecture and that you submit the homework by next Thursday. This homework is not going to be graded in terms of like A plus, A, B, B plus, B minus kind of evaluation. It's just going to be a homework assignment where you have to complete the homework assignment. If you do it well, then you get 100%. If it's sort of done but not done well, then you get half credit. If it's late, you'll get a late penalty. And if you don't do it, of course, you'll get 0. Okay, so we're going to start chapter 1 in the book. Like I said, this is the book that we're going to be using, Dorothy Zemak. The point of this chapter is to learn how to recognize and to write complete sentences and to learn the common features of a paragraph. As I said, writing is a process, so it takes a while, but what we need to start with is making better sentences and then grouping those sentences together to make better paragraphs. Now, I want to give you a piece of advice, general advice, which was shared with me by my high school English teacher, Mrs. DeCoste. She was a huge Shakespeare buff. She loved Hamlet. She taught it every year and never lost her enthusiasm. She was a great she should have been a professor, but she's an English teacher in my high school. She inspired a lot of us to be teachers or professors or just to pursue writing in general. She was just a very powerful individual. She had a strong personality, and she encouraged all of us to become better English students. I remember her well. I wasn't a great student at the time, and she really pushed me to try and improve myself. She used to say that you need to keep in mind these 3 C's. And I say this to, if you've heard this before because you've taken composition with me before, that's I'm sorry, but I repeat this every class because these are really good guidelines for becoming a better writer. There are 3 C's of writing. That's what she used to say. And she just kept repeating it over and over to us, but I remember them still. This is grade 11, so I guess I was 16 years old. That's like 22 years ago. She said there's 3 C's of writing. You need to be clear, you need to be concise, and you need to be coherent. And what did she mean by that? By clear, she meant that you need to write sentences where the other person can understand what you're trying to say. So that includes things like choosing the right words and spelling and grammar, right? You make a good sentence, somebody reads it and they say, yes, I get it. That's clarity. That's being clear. Concise is basically trying to say something in it. I would say it's the best way to describe concise is being efficient with words. Nobody wants to read 200 words when they can read 10. I'm probably guilty of this right now. It's partly because I'm not really used to using the camera and talking to myself or talking to the wall. So I'm probably not being efficient with the words. I apologize. So you're watching a longer video than you should. But that's the point. Sometimes there's a limit of space. So it's a certain amount of money per word, or there's just so much space on the front page of a newspaper. So if you can say more with less words, that's always better. And you don't want to lose, effectiveness, but being concise means you're saying it in the shortest way possible. And there's a judgment involved in that, but basically, first of all, repeating yourself is right out. You don't want to repeat yourself. That's sometimes we say in English, it's redundant, it's unnecessary to say. You might say something, you've made a statement, and you're just saying the same thing, basically just different words, but it's exactly the same thing. Unless there's a point, like trying to emphasize what you're trying to say. If it's just repeating unnecessarily, especially back to back, you say something and then you say it again, that needs to be deleted. Nobody wants to read that. Least of all me. But in general, you need to keep people's attention, and if you become repetitive and you're not efficient with your writing, you're not concise, then you're going to lose your audience. Less people are going to read. And as a consequence, you'll have a lower grade if you're being graded. The third thing, coherence. So coherence is basically, coherence is like glue, like sticking two things together. There's another word in English called adhere. When you adhere to something, it means sticking to it. And when you cohere, it's two things sticking together. So basically, it's connections between ideas, which I'm going to emphasize a lot. That involves logic and constructing an argument and making statements and supporting yourself. It's very important. If you just have a bunch of ideas that are not connected to each other, it's not really a good piece of writing. What it is a list, or it's a random, collection of ideas. That's not a paper. That's, like I said, that's a list. It's a bunch of different things. Just there's no obvious connection. So you need to use logic, and you need to support what you say all the time. And if you do that, then your paper will be coherent. You may or may not know the word incoherent. It's sometimes a word that we use more often. The opposite of coherence is incoherent. And when you say somebody's incoherent, you're basically saying that the way that they talk, or the way that they're behaving, is not understandable because it's unpredictable, random. You might go as far as saying it's kind of crazy, just because you don't understand it. Incoherent means somebody that's kind of, if you hear somebody who's incoherent, you might even judge that they've kind of lost their mind. That's what, if you're just shouting things with no apparent purpose, you're being incoherent. So I want your writing to be clear and concise and coherent. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether you're talking about text messages, blogging, writing a novel, writing an essay, or putting something up, as a banner or advertisement. These three ideas, these guidelines, they apply to any type of writing you'll do. You'll find that it's a sort of a universal guideline. So that's why I always mention it, because I kept those things in mind, and it's good to keep them in mind. How to actually do it is a little bit more difficult, but keep those words in mind throughout the class and throughout the rest of your life, the rest of your experience as a writer in English or any other language. I think these principles, these guidelines will be helpful. Okay, so when I evaluate you, when you're doing pieces of writing, what I'm looking for, first of all, is for you to be able to argue better, because that's the foundation of essay writing. Is you're going to present a statement. Normally it's going to be an argument about something, and then you're going to give reasons why that statement is valid, right? Sort of like a lawyer or a philosopher. You start with a statement, and then you support that statement, and then people see how that support makes your statement, your original statement, effective, and then they agree with you, and you persuade them. There are many different types of essays. The main ones that we're going to focus on are argumentative or persuasive, like making people, presenting an argument so that people agree with you and they understand your logic, or getting people to share or come over to your side, persuading them. We'll talk about comparative essays, which means looking at two things, whatever they are, two things, two events, two places, two businesses, two people, and analyzing them versus each other, which is also very useful and something that you do in everyday life, so it's good for you. There are other types: descriptive essays, reflective essays, that's more personal, research papers, which we're not going to talk about in this class, and so on. But we'll focus on those three: argumentative, persuasive, and comparative mostly, because I think that's in my mind, the point of an essay is really, the purpose of it is to communicate something effectively, and often there's no other reason for reading an essay. There are a few people that just sit down and say, I'm going to read some essays today, but there's not very many. Usually when you read an essay, it's because you're trying to get information. So the sooner you get to the point, the sooner that you start demonstrating your argument for the person, that's valuable to them. Essays are out there to provide information to people and to show how arguments are constructed. So I read essays all the time, but if I was going to read something in my free time, I'd probably read a fantasy novel, a biography, something about history. This is my personal library here. Probably read something like, something about the Civil War. This is a book about the Civil War. This is historical, not historical fiction. It's real history. Whatever you like. Science fiction or drama or mystery, whatever. That's probably what you're going to do in your free time. When you need information, you need to know something that's critical, you're going to read an essay or read an article or find a research paper, because you're trying to make yourself smarter and you're trying to understand something. So you need to get to the point. Creativity is not that important, okay? This is not a creative writing class. This is really about using English better and being a more effective writer, especially in terms of argument. So the main thing that I want to see is, do you make a good statement, a clear statement at the beginning? Can I see your argument? And then after that, do you support the argument? Is it logical? Argument, support, logic. Those are the main things. The other things like grammar, creativity, vocabulary, format, spelling, they're also important, but those are secondary. If you want to get an A, you have to have those three things. That I have to judge that those three things are done well. That the statement is there, the argument is visible, you've supported it, and then the logic follows throughout your paper, or paragraph, because we're going to do paragraphs mostly. By the end of the semester, it will make it longer. It's going to be more like a really short paper or a really long paragraph, whatever you want to call it. But that's what I want. I want you to focus on those things. The other things, they should be there too if you want to get a really good grade, if you want to get an A+. If everybody's doing things right, then I'm going to look at the secondary things too. But the fundamental things are those three. Okay, so the chapter starts out, really, we're just going to focus on the first few pages, okay? So question number 1 basically has kind of a survey. It's all about part-time jobs and whether high school students should do them or university students should do them, or you should volunteer, or part-time jobs are good money, or whatever. It's sort of like you have to give your opinion, and I'm going to say I don't like to use the opinion too much in this class, the word opinion. I prefer the word argument. I want you to make a statement, right? So it asks you, is it common or uncommon, or you're not sure? Now you shouldn't really say I'm not sure if you know, right? You have to make a choice, yes or no. Take a side, make a judgment, and for each question, there's A, B, C, D, E, there's 5. I want you to write your answer. Yes, it's common. No, it's not. And the most important thing is you need to follow up your answer by giving reasons. So after you say, high school students should have part-time jobs, it's common, and it's in Korea, it's not that common, actually. So you make your sentence, it's not that common, but I think it should be, right? Or you don't need to say think. Let's get rid of that word because that's forming an opinion. You really want to make a stronger statement, so you just say, high school students usually don't have part-time jobs, but they should. Or high school students in Korea usually don't have part-time jobs, but there's a good reason for that. And then explain. All I want is that statement and then a few sentences afterwards to give the reasons why you made that statement. Okay? So A, B, C, D, E, there should be 5 questions with 5 statements and 5 reasons following them. That's the first part of your homework. And then number 2, which we would normally do in class, but we can't because you're not here with me. But I would normally ask you, what are some examples of part-time jobs? Have you ever had a part-time job? And we would find out of the 20 of you or so, I think there's 22 in this class, out of the 22 of you, how many people have had part-time jobs? 3, 4, 5, 10, all of you, none of you? And that would, be a small sample of what it's like. If there's international students in the class, of course, they might have different experiences, but it's all just to discuss a perspective on this topic. So what kind of job do you think is best for you, a high school student or university student, is also there. I would normally have discussed what I did in university, which was my part-time job was working in a bar serving customers alcohol and food. And during the summer, I had what we call in Canada, it's not a part-time job because you're full-time. I was hired as a summer student, so I had a summer job. And that was a really horrible experience, which I normally tell everybody about, but I don't want to drag this lecture on too long. But I worked in a factory called Hadrian, which we made lockers, school lockers, and toilet partitions. If you've ever worked in a factory, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't worked in a factory, then you don't want to, trust me. It's 11-hour days. The pay is all right. At the end of the week, you're so exhausted that you can't spend any money, so you save a lot of money. But I used to say my summer was hell because I had 4 months, inside the factory. It was 45 degrees every day, and I got up I started at 6 a.m. So I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drove to my job, and then I worked for 11 hours, and I got home at 5:30 every day. And that, my friends, is not the job that you want to recommend somebody for university. I think university students should have part-time jobs, but maybe not that one. Although I did gain a lot of experience from that, and now I do appreciate the fact that I'm a professor and I can not work in a factory 11 hours a day, because that really motivated me to study better. So there are benefits. Whatever your argument is, I just want to see it. The important thing is make a statement, make a judgment. I could do both. It's not really a matter of being right or wrong, or yes or no being the correct answer. It's just you have to justify what you say. So if I was going to say university students should not have part-time jobs because I worked in a factory and it was horrible, and I was hot and I was tired and I was stressed every day. It was not good for me. I could say that. I was bored. There was lots of reasons why it was terrible. But I could also say, no, that's not the right perspective. The right perspective is, yes, it's good for you. No matter what job you have, it teaches you to save money. It teaches you to work hard. And it teaches you to value your classes. When I went back to university in the fall, some of my friends, some of my classmates, my colleagues, they would come back from summer vacation after, if they were wealthy, they were with their family and they traveled around, the backpacking in Europe, or, sailing a boat around, and they would come back with a tan and be like, oh my God, this is horrible. Studying is just the worst. I can't believe we're back in the classroom listening to this, old, boring professor. And I had the complete opposite experience. When I went back to university in September, I was just like, thank God the factory is done. And I can just go to class and take a class for 2 hours, and then I can take a nap, and then I can go back to class and then study for 2 more hours, and then go home and do my homework and watch TV. And it was heaven compared to my experience in the factory. So that's the important thing. Make a statement, make a judgment, back up what you say. I have both opinions. That's fine. But don't mix it up. Don't say yes and no at the same time. You don't want to confuse yourself, and that just weakens your argument. If you argue with yourself and you present both sides, I'm separating my arguments here. I would either, in my case, actually, I would recommend somebody have a hard university job. I think it's good for you. I survived, and I think it made me a stronger person and helped me develop. But there's the other side, of course, is I have no idea. I didn't, go through university without that experience, so I can't really say. Maybe it would be better just to have my parents give me money and just study hard. But in my case, I probably wouldn't have studied hard, so I think that was beneficial to me. Okay? Now, the second thing I want you to do number 1, A, B, C, D, E, 5 statements with support for each one. And then on page 8, it asks you to look again at exercise 8, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And this is a much easier exercise, but I want you to do it too because it's practicing building sentences. There are, like I said, A to G, which is 7 short phrases. And what they want you to do is take those phrases and make a complete sentence. First of all, make a complete sentence, but it should be complex. So you can add information to it. But make sure you take, the kernel, the group of words that's presented to you, and then add words to it to make a good sentence. And by good, I mean grammatically correct and adding more information to it to make it complex. Okay, so there's 2 things you have to do. Number 1, in the textbook, number 1 in the chapter is page 5, and you have to do number 10, which is on page 8. And please email that to me by next Thursday. I will summarize, I'll write a short summary related to what I've said to you in this video lecture, but I think the video lecture is the main component of this. This will be the main component also from now on. So focus on this lecture and listen to it. If you have to stop it and re-listen or something, or you need to look at what I've written, print out the summary or look at the summary on your phone or something and then watch me at the same time so you can understand, go ahead, that's fine. This is a writing class. So the summary that's on the website will not add any information. It'll sort of just explain maybe in more detail exactly what I said in this video lecture so that you can see the instructions in more condensed form. That doesn't take 35 minutes to watch, okay? So that's it for week 2. I have no idea how things are going to go this semester. I've heard all kinds of rumors that by the end of this month, the government is going to make a decision about what they're going to do with school. This is a very, very serious situation globally as well as in Korea. So please take it seriously. Take care of yourself. Sanitize your hands. Wear a mask. Don't go in crowded places. I know you want to play and have fun, but we all have things we can do at home. Watch your videos, play with your phone, call your friends. We all got to do our part, and hopefully the situation will get better and things will calm down. But regardless of what happens, we'll have to adjust. And I expect to see you at some point during the semester. We have no midterm in this class. Instead, you have to write do an assignment for me instead towards the end of the semester in May. So we don't have to worry about the testing in this class, so you're fortunate. This should be fairly easy for us to do until we get to June when we need to do an exam. But we'll deal with that when it comes. For now, just tune in every week, get credit for your cyber lecture, listen to my video lectures and read the summaries, and do your homework, and everything will be fine, and you'll improve your writing just like you would if you were in my class in person. Okay? Take care, and I'll talk to you again next week. If you have any questions, please, you can send me an email as well. If it's a question that applies to the whole class, then I will certainly speak about it in next week's lecture. Talk to you soon.